All right, we are live. Good evening and welcome to Morally Loaded. I'm Kay and I'm here with Allie.
Hello. Yes. Thank you guys for tuning in. This is Morally Loaded and Off My Chest with Tolly Bots. This is our new little crossover show where we come together and talk about culture and politics and the state of the world. And today, the topic that we're going to talk about, and I'm sure it'll take us in lots of different turns and directions, is cancel culture.
Yeah. And just kind of our views, where we think it, how it started, how it's gone, where we're at now, Yeah. So I have to say, when we decided to do this, I started scrolling back through all of my notes and all of my Facebook to try and get an idea of had I written anything on it, had I scribbled anything down earlier, and so I think my earliest going back to is something in 2020 that I wrote I said something to the effect of moral superiority is not revolutionary, and it's just random thoughts on that. But yeah, and as I went through my Facebook feed and everything like that, just to try and I'm never on there anymore, just to try and get a little bit of a grasp of where my mind was, because it's kind of like a digital diary. Yeah. I was partly surprised also to see that I hung on to, I think, a lot of the woke stuff for even as my mind was changing. You know what I mean? I still hung on to it for a little bit longer than I had initially thought, just seeing what I was posting. It's kind of having one foot in each world, grappling with this doesn't make sense, but also I still want to be a good person, and I still believe in a lot of these values or ethics, and not knowing how to bridge that,
Yeah, no, I totally relate to that. Living with sort of one foot in each world. And I think I kind of remember that experience too. I don't know how much I something that I don't remember how much I was posting the cringe stuff like you're saying. Because I remember being quiet, but I remember feeling the pressure suddenly when things would happen that people were posting about. And it was suddenly my first time not posting about it. And it sounds so shallow and silly, and it is shallow and silly, but it was part of the problem, and it feeds into the cancel culture, right? When there's all of these unwritten expectations of you. If you are a good person, then you will post the black square, right? Yeah. You're going to post something to your story. You're going to amplify marginalized voices. And so the first notable thing to me was just when all of all the good people around me, right? All the people from the community of the good around me would post things. I was just staying more quiet. And even in some ways, in a way that, not that I regret, but in a way that I've now come to have stronger opinions on. But I even remember I just not commenting on stuff in the Russia and Ukraine war. And again, I don't even think that it was ever. I think in hindsight, there wasn't much to be confused about, but also I stand by me not posting about this because who the hell am I? I know nothing about it. I have moral instincts about sovereignty, right? And about the types of governments that these two nations have, and all of that stuff. But also I get so frustrated by people commenting on Gaza and Israel stuff when they know literally nothing about it. And so I'm glad in some ways that I didn't need to, my voice was not going to add anything to the conversation, but I do remember that feeling of uh-oh, all the people around me, everyone's doing the virtue signaling, and I'm now for the first time just not participating in it, which was probably jarring for people in my life because I was just such a poster, right? That as is being a social justice warrior.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think around that time, I think like, like the context of our lives kind of like really plays into it. And like during this time, I guess like I had my son in 2019 and my daughter in 2020. So I was like back to back. Like I was pregnant, I had an infant, and then when my son was like 3 months old, I got pregnant with my daughter, and then had an infant and pregnant, and then I had two babies, and then my daughter was born in COVID, and like everything that was going on in the world was going on. Um, but like nobody had any expectations for me at that period of time
Right.
because
Kind of nice.
yeah, so it was nice, and I just kind of like got to sit back and watch, and I didn't have to really do anything, and that that gave me a little bit of space in that time to not really have to you know form any opinions or have any idea of what was going on, and
Right.
yeah, because I had no clue.
Right. It gives you a little,
Yeah.
it gives you a bit of an excuse to not comment, right? Because no one's expecting you to weigh in because you're at home with the two babies, especially during COVID. You're at home with the two babies during this
Yeah.
crazy time, right?
Yeah.
And people had a lot of grace, I think, for like, I mean, as they generally should, but like, especially in the beginning, well, really throughout COVID, for people with like young children, with like babies and stuff,
Yeah.
I feel like there was a lot of understanding and concern. So yeah, the space that afforded you, and I relate to that too, because when I had my first like turn away, when I first became disenchanted, with the left, and they turned on me basically, again, as we kind of touched on in
Mhm.
our last conversation, um, it was we were actually already into COVID, right? But so it was the summer of 2021. So I guess it was like about a year into COVID that makes it.
Yeah.
But it was still COVID time, as everyone remembers. COVID lasted for a pretty long time. But anyway, I was in graduate school when COVID hit, and then I ended up taking leave of absence for COVID. There were like funding cuts basically that were not really the fault of COVID, but the university got to use COVID as like kind of an excuse for
Yeah. Okay.
themselves. And so they gave out like free time off basically, where like you could take a leave of absence and it wouldn't be used as like a personal leave. It would be used as like a COVID leave. They made this exception. So I took the COVID leave. So I wasn't at school anymore. And I really attribute that to my ability. I don't know how it would have turned out if I wasn't so close to the center of all of these things. All of my friends had the same radical politics to me, to a more, slightly varying degrees, but my close friends, people that I spent the most time with at university and in the clinics and labs that I was working in were just as radical as me. And in sad ways that I already feel sad talking about it, because there are like a couple people who were like really my dearest, closest friends,
Mhm.
who they also moved away because, with doctoral programs, people go on to their internships and they typically don't stay in the state or city that they're in. So these two friends of mine, they ended up going on to internships and leaving the island and stuff. So there was also physical distance in that way. But these friendships really dissipated because my views just started to change so much that we had so little in common. We would start to have we would always do like our Zoom phone calls to keep in touch while they were on their internships. And at a certain point, I just realized how I just needed to not say things, because I was at the point where I felt uncomfortable faking the virtue signal stuff, faking the woke stuff,
Yeah.
in a way that felt really like dirty in my soul, that was making me feel a little sick, like I
Mhm.
was, speaking of the cancel culture stuff, I was like realizing for the first time the phenomenon of self-censorship, and it was
Yeah.
making me feel really sick, and in a way of just like maybe my own personal predisposition. I'm a talker. I've always been like I've always felt there's like a sense of justice and like being understood, like, in ways that are over dramatic and stuff. And like as a kid, I felt very strongly, but I suddenly felt that, like, not only was it really bad for me to lie about believing these things, like, having to say things I didn't believe became really, really difficult for me.
Yeah.
But then I also started to feel like if I don't speak, I'm just contributing to this culture of everyone staying silent. And so that battle was kind of starting to burn in me. But anyway, there was a few things. One of them was to say, similar to you, it was really that
Yeah.
literal space that I attribute to being able to change my worldview so much, because I had the
Yeah.
distance from the people and like the epicenter, the university hub, literally, where all this extremism not came from, because I didn't pick all this up from my university, but we all pass it around with each other, all the
Yeah.
students and stuff like that, and some of the staff. But I also realized, right, this is when I was first started taking seriously cancel culture, which is not something you really take seriously if you're a person on the left in good standing. But once I started to change the way I saw myself and saw the world, I started seeing cancel culture as a significant issue, and that
Yeah.
rubbed right up against this desire that I was feeling to just be honest about my change in beliefs and to not say the socially convenient thing or socially required thing.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I get that. I think, yeah, once you start seeing it, it becomes painful. Like when you want to
Yeah.
talk about it, especially if you've been outspoken, and especially if you're like, your whole thing is like speaking about what you feel is justice, and then you're seeing justice from a new angle. And it's like
Yeah.
kind of also like, I don't know if it's exciting to have a new angle from which to see things, because it's not, I don't know if I'd use that word, but it's it's like you want to share it and you want to talk about it and you want to explore it
Yes.
more. And a lot of times that there isn't a lot of space, when you're first coming to these realizations. At the time, there might not be people to really talk about it with, or you know what I mean? Like you might not have a community that's like open to having these discussions. So then it feels extra stifling to like be in a situation where you're like, think you're just going along with, you know, whatever you've been going along with before and you have believed, and now you're just, staying quiet. And that quiet feels, it can feel forced when you're,
Yeah.
when you're getting to a point
And
where you're like wanting to stick up for it, but you're like, some places the consequences, the cancellation or what may be is, you can't always, I understand why people can't always risk it.
yeah.
you know
Yeah. Totally. Totally. And that was like also part of the reason why I started like speaking online, was this tension between, like you're saying, I really understand the practical reasons why a lot of people can't speak up, especially like, if you have to provide for your family and stuff like this, right? Whether it's
yeah.
fair or not, this is versus ought distinction that I think is so important, that gets lost, I think, frankly, in a lot of conversations with people who come from a left-wing worldview.
Yeah.
But yeah, it was like I need to speak. I basically, I think I've said this to you. I don't know if I said it in our conversation last time, but I see a lot of like what I'm doing by
Mhm.
talking on the internet as creating a permission structure, because
Yeah.
that's what I needed to think these thoughts. I needed permission to think these thoughts, to challenge the orthodoxy of what I had previously believed. And that came for me first in the form of Katie Herzog from the Blockchain Reported podcast, who
Yeah.
was this funny lesbian journalist, basically.
Yeah.
So she had she had the LGBTQ card, right? Like, so I could
Mhm.
relate to her in that way. But also she was obviously not a bad person. She was a marginalized person herself, right? All of these like things, that all of
Yeah.
the ways that I was thinking about it at that time. And even when I first started listening to the podcast, it would offend me, which is so funny now, because I'm really to the right of Jesse and Katie at this
Yeah.
point. But Katie talking about some of the cultural stuff really gave me permission for the first time to think about these, to first think and then to speak about these things.
Mhm.
And I think that's really important. And And I know what that did for me, hearing other
Yeah.
people that I related to, that I respected, that I thought were good moral people, say the things that you're not just say the things you're not allowed to say, right? Because that sounds so cheesy and immature. And in some ways, that's the problem of what we're seeing right now on the right, is the vice signaling, is just saying the thing you're not allowed to say. So of course, that's not what I meant. But this is actually something interesting that we should get into. It's like it gets really this conversation has allowed a lot of bad actors to manipulate these terms and these not ideas, but like the way that we frame the conversation around cancel culture.
Yeah, so like everything turns into a cancellation. Any type
Yeah.
of like pushback or
criticism
or like saying, I don't know, saying maybe somebody should interview somebody not in like a softball way, maybe that you should offer more pushback or what have you, turns into this accusation of being canceled or being censored or being deplatformed or what have you.
Yeah.
When that's just not what cancellation is, you know. I've always thought like cancellation is not just like a person or two people or a group of people even who decide that you've done something wrong and no longer want to associate with you. It's a group of people, a mob of people who have decided that they're going to exert pressure on your job, your social situation, and your family to try and get everybody to disconnect from you. And whoever doesn't yield to that pressure also becomes a target for a cancel mob to go after or harass or to put pressure upon until they do the thing that they want to do. So it's not merely just losing your job, because there could be things a person could do out in public or potentially in private that could impact whether they should have a certain type of employment. Those things just exist, you know. Maybe running and like tattling to somebody's boss isn't always a good thing, but maybe it is. Like maybe there are people who work with like vulnerable people or old people or children who shouldn't be in these positions, and we should say something.
There's two dimensions here. There might be more, but what occurs to me now is these like two dimensions to this phenomenon of cancel culture that we're talking about that need to be like, I think, discussed separately.
Mm-hmm.
And they have different implications. The first is the severity of the punishment. So you make that good, interesting distinction. And there's not necessarily a clear line, but like you're saying, it's like, it's not just criticism, right? It's not just attention. It is this kind of mob justice, which often means that the punishment is greater than the crime, right?
Yeah.
And it is this like, it's trying to harm the person's. I'm trying not to load this like as a negative or a positive thing, right? Because then we have to talk about the thing that the libs were saying for so long, which is like, well, what about accountability culture, right? But so there's the one dimension of like the punishment and the severity of the punishment and the means, right? The mob style, the online style, right?
Yeah.
And then there is like the content. And I think that might be, both are worth talking about, but the content might be where it gets more interesting, because there's one way that that Batya Angar Sargon commented on this cancel culture phenomenon recently that I think is like super simple and clear, and I really like this description, but it still requires deeper inspection for the reasons that I will state. I always set myself up with all these grand pre-explanations. But Batya essentially said, cancel culture was never canceling, was never, getting people fired for being Nazis. She basically said
that wasn't the problem with it. Yeah.
Right. She was like, her in her opinion, the problem with
Mhm.
cancel culture was firing people who weren't Nazis for being Nazis.
Yeah.
And I think in many ways that's a really useful and helpful distinction, right? Because so much
Yeah.
of cancel culture was people, whether they said something that actually should be debatable in an open
Mhm.
society with a healthy Overton window, that people were just calling bigoted in some way, or
Yeah.
maybe a joke, right? Or a situation just taken out of context, like we've seen a million times in the last 5 plus really 10 years of like
Mhm.
a video clip of something, right? And so I think that's a really good point, and I appreciate it. And it is useful because that
Yeah.
comes up over and over again. Is like when there was that lady, that Hendrix lady, or I don't think that was her name. I don't know. That woman who got caught saying the N-word on video to that like child.
Oh,
And
yes, yes.
maybe that child was stealing from her kid and was like this neighborhood bully and was not being watched by parents. All of those things might have been true, right? But what
Yeah.
happens is this video of this woman just like just screaming the N-word at a child in a public park. And that was an example of, there were so many people who like came to this woman's
Mhm.
defense.
Yeah.
And that's where it goes into the question of, okay, maybe the question here is severity of the punishment, that first domain. But in the
Mhm.
second domain, it's like, no, it's not. The problem with cancel culture, like Batya said, wasn't that people were facing social or job consequences
Mhm.
when they did something really wrong. It was that people were, James Damore being pushed out of Google for like
Yeah.
stating simple biological facts, right, about the differences between males and females, cognitive
Yeah.
differences and preferences between males and females. And so it's like people who, one way to conceptualize cancel culture is people who didn't deserve it basically getting these like
Yeah.
huge punishments. But then there's another aspect to it, which I think is fair and like needs to be discussed, which is, okay, what about people who actually say and do horrible things? Part of the
Mhm.
problem with cancel culture also is that it's this like, it is this mob justice. So maybe the person did something bad, and moral people would disagree with them and would choose not to associate with them, and maybe people in
Mhm.
that person's life, it would be incumbent upon them to like share this concern with their friend and try to get their friend to change. But there's also this like finality and extremity of
Yeah.
cancel culture, right? Of like, okay, maybe the person committed the crime, but this punishment now suddenly really outweighs it.
Yeah.
And so that's something serious to contend with also. And then there is just the bastardization that I think you and I are trying to talk about here too, which is essentially cancel culture now is just publicly criticizing someone for saying anything.
Yeah.
Anything now, right? It's
Yeah.
just that like, nope, we're supposed to be open to any idea, and
Mhm.
we need to battle it out we need to battle all these ideas against each other, which I agree with.
Mhm.
But now suddenly the Dave Smith direction of it is, and we'll know who wins based on like the number of views that the person making that argument gets online.
Yeah.
It's like, well, I don't know if that's ever what was intended, by the battlefield of ideas, right? But so there, I
Yeah.
think all of these things like really unfortunately requires a lot of nuance of
Yeah.
like, how do we handle social consequences
Mhm.
for what we believe to be abhorrent, beliefs or ideas. And
Yeah.
then, should we? That's, I think, the real question that's being raised now is, should we ever? Is it,
Yeah.
and the problem with the right, and I say all this and I cringe because I'm like, oh, I sound like such a fucking progressive. But I don't know, they're just like they're framing it as like ever having moral clarity and believing that some things are wrong or bad is like being a
Yeah.
moral F. I don't know if you can, I don't know what kind of words we can use on, it's a slur, so I guess I'll keep away from it. But a moral FAG, right? It's like
Yeah.
somehow uncool and cringe to be like, that's fucked up, bro. And part of this does tie into this vice signaling that Richard Hanania and others have spoken about, where it's like seen as in the most extreme ways, it's seen as a weakness, right? In some of these circles, like you have to say the most shocking and offensive thing, and you
Yeah.
obviously can't call someone out for doing it, because that's the whole game. The whole game is
Yeah.
we're all going around basically and saying the most shocking and offensive things. But how do we? It seems like that can't actually be what we wanted from this, right? Cancel culture was a problem, and it's something that needed to be corrected for, but it does feel like we're in an open overcompensation era right now, which
Yeah.
is if you even try to draw personal moral lines
Yeah.
and use your freedom of speech to freely associate or dissociate with
Hmm.
people, that is now being called. I don't even know if it's being honestly perceived as, although maybe it is in
Yeah.
some cases. I'm really I try to give people the
Yeah.
benefit of the doubt, but that is being called cancel culture, right? So, for example, Ben Shapiro making explicitly clear, I don't want Tucker Carlson or Nick Fuentes or Candace Owens to have their channels removed. I don't want them to be pulled off the internet.
Hmm.
I don't want them to be debanked. He couldn't make it any clearer that he doesn't want those types of cancel culture consequences to befall these people. But he's calling them out clearly, plainly, by name, and yes, condemning them, making moral condemnations. Moral condemnations are now seen as cancel culture, and that's
Yeah.
a real fucking problem.
Yeah. No, I think I don't know. I think cancel culture was a problem, yes, because people who weren't like, it wasn't just like bad people who deserve bad things to happen to them being canceled. I think that there is a part of that. Then on the other hand, I think um like mob justice just isn't like, it's just never, I don't really think it's ever the way to go. Not in the world we have now, not with the tools we have now. I don't think you can demand accountability from somebody. And I think cancel culture really seeks to demand accountability, and accountability has to be given. It has to be done by the person. It's a process. It takes like tremendous amount of insight and introspection and psychological space to be able to even broach that. And
Mm-hmm.
I don't think you can push that. I think people want to push that. I understand the instinct to want to control people who we perceive as harmful, but I don't actually think that it works out that way. And I think what it does is I think it's like it's dehumanizing, and it seeks to deperson somebody. It seeks to strip them of everything that makes them them, all of their connections and all of their community, and just leave them isolated. And let's just say that there are abusive people who do bad things, who treat people poorly and have awful views, and who we think are a danger to the community, further isolating people who are prone to this type of behavior is I don't see how that makes any of it better. Like, I don't think that that's an effective way to move forward. And if there are serious things going on, like serious abuses, then we have a legal system, and we have to like we just you have to go through the appropriate channels, because one thing that like a cancellation doesn't afford anybody is like to mount a defense. And I think that that's like a really, it's an important thing to be able to defend yourself meaningfully, and cancellation just kind of like wipes that out completely. It doesn't give
Mm-hmm.
you any ability to do any of that. But yeah, now there's people saying criticism of somebody is akin to being canceled, or like, which is not what it is. Just saying that people maybe shouldn't talk to somebody, or that you think they ought not talk to somebody, you know that's not seeking to like strip everything good from their lives from them. And I think
Mm-hmm.
what we were talking about before, I see this as like these people saying, oh, Ben Shapiro wants, I don't know what the exact words were, but he wants everybody to condemn or vilify or disconnect from or whatever Tucker or this. And so and so does as well, or all these people, you know what I mean? And in a way, they're like willfully obfuscating, willfully like confusing their message. They're feigning confusion about what is being said, about the specific criticism, and they're turning it into this call for cancellation. They're saying that that's what it is, and in a way that I feel like that's a way to censor what's actually being said and the actual points that are trying to be made when you're purposefully, willfully, I don't know, twisting somebody's words and trying to get enough people on board with that. It just completely, I don't know. It's and I don't know if they're doing it on purpose. You're muted.
Yeah, I just realized that. There's so many threads there that I want to pick up on, but I agree. And you make an interesting point, and I don't know exactly how to verbalize it, although I think you did a good job starting, of like in bad faith misrepresenting someone's argument so severely, right? That
Mm-hmm.
becomes their argument, that becomes what is understood of their argument in
Mm-hmm.
public. And so in that way you are like depriving them of their free speech rights to a certain extent, not in a literal way, right? But like their message can't be heard because it's being intentionally misrepresented. Yeah, and I guess like I don't have answers. I have just a lot of questions and just like trying to work through this. And I think as a society and as a conservative movement, which we don't perfectly fit into, but like these are the questions that are going to need to be worked out. Yeah, and there's a book that I've recommended 100 times, so I'll just recommend it here for good measure. It's called So You've Been Publicly Shamed by Jon Ronson. And it is what it sounds like. It's a book about cancellation, frankly, that was a little bit ahead of its time. The book was published, I think, like 2016, 2018. So even like before like peak woke in a way, right? Where cancellations just like skyrocketed. And he covers several like case studies. He follows the stories of several people who were canceled for different reasons. And he also does like a bit of a anthropological, historical exploration of like public shaming in America. And he says he comes across this like belief, basically, like there was this belief in America that the reason that people went from like public hangings in the square and like public executions and these public forms of punishment, people assumed it was because of like sort of like technological advancements, that as people like spread out and moved away to the cities and stuff, you just like couldn't effectively punish people. They could like go and reinvent themselves, move around. So that was like the accepted kind of belief around this. But what he found actually was basically the opposite, that like these public punishments were so detrimental. There's something about the rest of us humans and the way that we treat people in this way. There is something organic about it too, which is something that I want to bring up in a second. That basically these public punishments never left people. They served as a scarlet letter that people were never able to recover from, and in a way that was unjust, right? That was not properly punishing people for their crimes. And again, the interesting thing about this book by Jon Ronson is he follows some people who made, there's this one woman, Justine Sacco, who got canceled basically for tweeting. She made a quote unquote racist joke about like white people not getting AIDS or something. She was on her way. She was about to take off on fly to South Africa or something. And she makes a tweet about like, on my way to Africa, like, hope I don't get AIDS. Like, just kidding, I'm white. And she was actually like quite like a sort of left-wing person. And in her mind, she was making the type of like a joke about racism where racism is the butt of the joke.
Yeah.
not black people were not meant to be the butt of her joke. But anyway, you could even say that it was bad, or you could say that it wasn't. Either way, right? The point is, her example was someone who made an off-colored joke, and then literally she lands in South Africa and she's already gone viral, and there are people there in South Africa like waiting for her to harass her, and she loses her job, and it like and it she's like the number one Google searched name in the world for a certain period of time. And it impacts her family and all of this stuff. So there's people like her. And then there's also other people that he follows who do bad things. There's this author, Jonah Lehrer, who gets caught plagiarizing, basically. He's this like critically acclaimed author who's making all this money and winning all of these like writing awards. And then Michael Moynihan, a journalist who is one of my favorite like thought leaders right now, who does a couple shows and podcasts, finds out, basically, is like, he's a real history buff and like a music nerd, and he realizes that this guy Jonah Lehrer is lying about direct quotes from Bob Dylan, basically made up a bunch of these quotes and plagiarized some stuff, and follows that scandal too. And it was like, now this is a person who did something wrong and wasn't taking accountability for it. Michael Moynihan was writing it up and was trying to give this guy time to like account for these things or whatever, and he wouldn't. He dug his heels in. And so you're set up not to feel sorry for this guy, right? Like, he's a bad guy. He's rude. He thinks too highly of himself. He actually plagiarized. He actually made up quotes, right? And then you get to the scene where he gets outed, basically, and he's invited to speak at this like lunch thing, whatever. And this is like at the early days of Twitter, and they decide at this event he's like the keynote speaker, and they decide to do a Twitter live feed that's playing on screen behind him. They gave people, if you recall, this was like a common thing with like American Idol and stuff. It would be like, you could tweet something live during a show, and now for the first time you could like participate in live TV or live events, right? Where you could see what the thing that you typed show up on the screen. You remember what I'm talking about, right? I'm sure you do. I'm sure the people listening do too. But basically, he's going through his like apology in this way, and he's got the Twitter live feed up behind him, and suddenly the tweets start rolling in of people just, this piece of shit, no one should be accepting this apology, just start jumping and attacking him, and he's just like watching it live while he's like trying to, and suddenly you have sympathy for this guy who did the objectively wrong thing and wasn't even accepting the punishment that might have been more fitting in a way, right? And you just realize like just how detrimental to the soul, like how there's this human need to be understood. To be understood by your fellow man, and how crushing it is, to feel misunderstood and to feel hated and to feel hunted. And there is something interesting. I think a lot of people, maybe especially on the right now, are trying to frame cancel culture as censorship, as in an almost conspiratorial way, like especially with Ben Shapiro, oh yeah, Ben Shapiro and the Mark Levin. And Mark Levin has been talking positively about cancel culture. So that guy's a fucking idiot. So I'll put him outside of the conversation for now. But there's this like feeling, even when it was like corporations who would like fire people because they were being, attacked on Twitter and stuff like that. There's a desire to still see this as like, well, the corporations are doing it, or the powerful lobbies or something are like exposing the bad thing people say. But actually, a lot of these are not directed by one person. They're not top down. They're actually organic. And it really is like a bunch of people see these things online and they just chime in. Yes, it's true. There are campaigns to cancel people, right? There are harassment campaigns. There are people who will put something out to say, everyone look at this. And they'll give like, action plans, go comment this, go report here. Here's the phone number. So some people are doing it in this explicit way. In many other cases, it is this organic mob that just forms digitally, because that's how we're communicating so often. But people just organically step in and take part of this. That makes it both dangerous and unknown, and also like I think back to Megyn Kelly talking about feeling all of this. She claims people were trying to cancel her. Now, do I think that's a straw man? Yeah. I don't think that's really what was happening. But the reason that I had a little sympathy for her feeling that way is because I was seeing people on Twitter calling her out. Now, they weren't
Yeah.
saying take Megyn Kelly off the airways. They weren't saying Sirius XM,
Yeah.
you need to, none of that was happening. But they were calling her out. And it does start to look like a mob. And I do think all of these people, likely, or most of them, were individually coming to this conclusion. They're watching her show, they're fans of hers, they're disappointed in what she's saying. That's how I felt. I was a fan of her. I used to watch her show every day. I don't anymore. She's just like really let me down. And I know she doesn't owe me anything. But it's like I could have easily been one of those voices. And in some ways I am one of those voices. I didn't like tweet at her, but I've spilt a lot of minutes talking about this on podcasts and stuff. I had the first episode on my channel, Off My Chest, is a conversation with Noam Dorman about Megyn Kelly and how she's handling all of this stuff. So there's also this other aspect, right, where like things can feel like cancellation or feel like a mob, but they might not even like, there doesn't mean that there's a puppet hand up there, right? Some of this is human nature playing out. We naturally get into mobs.
Yeah. Yeah, I think at the height of it, because I think we're past most of it now, and I think it's different because like kind of like the type of people who listen to Megyn Kelly are not necessarily the same people who were like super into cancellations like 4 years ago or whenever we were at the peak of it. Not to say that there's no overlap, but like, broadly speaking, I think it's a little like those audiences are a little bit different. But there is something about like the root psychology of people wanting to complain about something. Definitely that's, it can be similar there. But
and to not just complain, but to commiserate, like to connect in your complaining, and again, in a way that I think can be really organic. Yeah. Human nature, like you said.
Yeah. So I'm not sure where I was going with that, but I think also it must be some of these like super viral cancellations that we've seen, not just like, I mean, there's small ones that happen to people in everyday life that we don't really ever see about. Do you know what I mean? They're like small little things in like these tiny little ecosystems of their own communities. And it happens like on Facebook or in a little group, or you know what I mean? They're not these like huge ones, but on these like really viral ones, and they're not always to celebrities. Sometimes they're just to like people, I just think about how absolutely traumatic that must be for the rest of your life after. Every time you go to turn on the news, you're confronted with people who have once covered a story about you probably unfairly. You every time you all of your memories from your workplace that maybe you like to work at, maybe you had awesome coworkers, is now tainted with this. The coffee shop or the bar or wherever you used to go in your city or gym that you can't go to anymore. So it's like it rewrites and it fundamentally changes like your trust in people, especially for a lot of people. They the full story, never gets out, and it just flattens them completely. It takes them from a full complicated person to this like caricature of a human being, and so, but I think I was thinking about today, and I think like the best way I could describe cancel culture when we look back at like how it started, because we had like call out culture first, or call in culture, and all these things, and this is also at the same time
so
that like
call in culture. I remember that change. Cringe.
This is also around the same time that like therapy speak starts getting like really big. And cancel culture is like activism meets therapy, and it's this it ties into like everybody who's using the word boundaries all the time, you know what I mean, for things and harm, and it's just like this way of taking like your personal like therapy desires or speech or boundaries, you know what I mean? And making it super big on a very public scale for everybody to adhere to. Yeah.
Yeah, and just the more we're talking, I'm just thinking about we're in a real predicament right now, right? Because most people, or people like us, or at least you and I, but I think a lot of people would agree that mob justice is dangerous, like literally dangerous. I mean, mobs get violent, right? You know, these are just like observable facts. We
But
think the mob justice is wrong.
The left losing cancel culture and losing the ability to cancel people will and continue to result in more left-wing violence. I am 100%. I believe that fundamentally, because they went from having a very effective tool to silence people to not having it. And they didn't lose cancel culture because they put it down and they decided to stop doing it. They lost it because it stopped being effective.
Right.
You know, and I believe we will see vigilante justice go up from the left continually because they got used to kind of like having this ability to control.
Yeah. Well, not to turn this into a bash the left session, which I'm very good at, but I think that's quite profound what you said. And it just, you know, that they didn't lose cancel culture, or they didn't give up on cancel culture. They didn't put an end to it because it was morally wrong and harmful. They lost it because it stopped working, because to a certain extent, the vibes and the culture started to shift. So less people cared. It was less damning. Right. But they, like you said, they backed off of it because it stopped being effective. And that's exactly how I feel about the left and woke. And that's what's been really frustrating in some of my recent conversations about people who want to claim that, like, they won't say woke is dead, but they'll say that it's like been defeated on the left and people aren't running on that anymore. And it's like, well, yeah, because it stopped being effective. Because as some of them will, as the ones who are willing to acknowledge that woke is a problem at all for the left, they acknowledge that it's an optical loser. Right. that it is no longer accomplishing their goals, but they haven't said, oh, it's actually immoral to judge people on the basis of their skin color or their sexuality or their sex or any of these things. Oh, that's depressing, Kay, and scary. That you could see an uptick in violence because there are other means of punishment, of extrajudicial punishment, right? It has lost its efficacy. That's scary.
Yeah. I mean, that's what I think, but like, I hope I don't want to be right about that. Right. But it just, it was such an effective tool for so long. Right. And it worked, and it had a lot of people, like, I don't know, there was something that really brought people together. Like, this common hatred really brings people together. Like, I've gotten to the point in my life where I don't think a common hatred is very fruitful. Like, I don't think it's very good for the soul. I don't think it's good for my psyche to you know what I mean?
But it does bond
fall
humans.
into that. And that, I mean, it doesn't mean that it never ever happens. It's just like I try and be mindful of that. You know what I mean? It's not what I want to build. I want to build friendship or coalition or anything like based on just things I hate, you know?
Me neither. But and I don't, and I agree with you. And I don't think I'm about to contradict that, but I do think this just walks us right into this really tricky spot that we're in of like, me neither, but also to a certain extent, that would kind of mean that we can never hate anyone or make judgments against anyone, because other people will join in, even if we aren't the initiator, and it may turn into a mob, right? Another thing that John Ronson in his book, So You've Been Publicly Shamed, talks about is like the beginning of like social media justice felt revolutionary in a positive way. You know what I mean? It was putting the power into the hands of the people, you know? And it's like, so, you know, you didn't have the power to take on the corporations or something like that, but like you and your fellow man could like boycott, basically. You know, you could in one way you could more effectively coordinate boycotts, right? You could get together with other people and like and take action and be more powerful in that sense. Now, that's all very like class warfare coded and like populism coded, and I'm very anti all of that stuff. So it seems cringe to me now, but it really did feel like a revolutionary positive thing to a lot of people.
Yeah.
And like you said, I mean, I agree. I think it's bad. I don't want to be motivated by hatred. But then I think about, and what I'm about to say is going to sound really weak. A lot of things that I say and feel, I feel like I can't are weak because I'm not a religious person, and so like I don't get to like rely on this thing that I can just tell everyone I know is true and given to me from God. So bear with me with what I'm about to say. It's going to sound a little woo woo, but like God or the universe or evolution. Let's go with evolution, even, right? We can just keep it out of the realm of God. Like we have this emotion for a reason. And again, I don't want it brings me back to my question of like, how do we ever draw moral lines? Not the focus doesn't need to be on ruining and depersoning. And that is the unfortunate consequence, both when it's justified and not justified. There's a few things. How do we ever make moral decisions and draw actual boundaries? And who gets to decide when it's justified? Because that really is kind of where most people fall, is like cancel culture is bad because it happened in unjustified ways. Either the punishment was too extreme or the person didn't really commit an infraction. But who gets to decide these things?
Well, I don't think, and when I mean, well, let me just clarify. When I mean to say that like the common hatred thing isn't good, that doesn't mean that I don't think that we should feel hatred or disgust or disdain. It's just,
right.
I think the glue that holds things together has to be deeper than just that.
Shouldn't be hatred.
It shouldn't be.
I think that's wise.
So a common, and even I think it could even be like a framing thing, right? Like instead of not liking something, like not liking cancellation, like, and hating that, like I could just be more for like, I don't know, like other forms of justice, or you know what I mean, or different ways of handling things, or pro free speech, or I don't know, like
right. There are ways
things handled with the legal system, pro law and order, as opposed to like mob justice. It doesn't have to be all like anti this or anti this. So sometimes it can be just in the framing, and I think sometimes that's helpful because it could give you something positive to work towards, as opposed to only something to shy away from. But I also think it's good for our bodies and our minds to tell us to recoil from something, that this is bad for you. And when you see that, you want to alert other people to it as well. There's just like this moral superiority, or this certainty that comes with it. Is like that certainty is the trap I don't want to fall into again, because I was so certain for so long about so many things. And it's not that I can't ever be sure now, but my certainty should be more for me, and I don't want to take my certainty and like push it onto other people. You know? And I think the cancel culture kind of does that. It takes my morals, like my moral certainty over something, or a person's moral certainty over something, and
enforces it.
And over a situation that most of the time the person hasn't been present for and doesn't know all the surrounding details of, and it kind of like puts your moral framework onto it, fits it like this, says this is what it is, here we go, and labels it, and like we're off to the races. And I think that that's like a problem, right? But not necessarily any of these emotions. We should definitely be in tune to that. It's just I know when I'm feeling like too self-satisfied or too smug or too like for me it could just be, it's a little bit of a whoa, step back, like why am I doing this?
You always say so many things that really resonate with me. We're in a fine-tuning stage. I called it an overcompensation, and I think that's true in some ways, but we're in a fine-tuning stage because, like you said, like we need to be in touch with those feelings of disgust when we feel a visceral desire to recoil or to pull back. God. Sorry, this is all live. This is why I'm not super coherent right now. These thoughts are live. I don't mean the stream. I mean my thoughts are live.
No,
And
I
the
know.
stream. But our reactions were hijacked.
Yeah.
And now we are all, not all of us, but those of us who are thinking about this stuff, and those of us maybe more on the right who are very critical of cancel culture, we are trying to recalibrate and tune our ability to react. And I don't know that we're getting it right. Or and maybe I need to be more optimistic.
Yeah. Well, I think cancel culture, I think there was like an aspect of it coming from the left that was like an effort to control, right? And I think that this like backlash coming from the right is also an effort to control, you know, and the right didn't have as much cultural cachet and as much cultural power. And now it's stepping into that, and it's falling into some of the traps that the left had when it had a lot more cultural power.
Yeah.
So I think it's very normal for it to, you know, want to employ the tools that it just watched, you know, us or the left use. I say us, I'm not like, but when I was there, you know what I mean?
I was part of it. Yeah.
Yeah. So I think that that's very normal. And I think cancel culture, yeah, for the left, it was this part of this like uprising therapy and activism culture kind of clashing to take this to this major level. But it was like really driven by this need for control and wanting to like control people's like actions and behaviors and wanting to like adjust everybody's morality and to fine tune it into a certain way. And why that happens, I mean, like, that's a whole other thing in a very large world where there's like infinite possibilities. Now I understand, you know, I think it has something to do with that. But all that to say is that it happened and was what it was, and we are where we are. And now that the right's trying to do it, I think they're just going to have to burn themselves out on it. I don't think we can stop it. I think we can just like, you know,
well, there's kind of two
saying
things.
the same thing and see how they're doing it, because they're not going to do it the exact way that the left was. They're going to like the right is going to have its own spin, and it's going to be wrong for the same reasons that like it was wrong for the left to do it. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So it's kind of like being able to observe it and to get particular, I think, with calling it out. But I think it's going to take time to see how they play it out. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, I do. And there's kind of two things happening on the right. There is sort of the more traditional version of cancel culture playing out against the left by some, not all on the right. And some people on the right have been quite principled, I would say, but many have just done like what you're saying. I'm just going to use these tools back against them. And they even see, they see what they're doing as a reaction, and it is a reaction, like we're acknowledging, right? But some of them are just utilizing the same tools. And then others are, it's interesting because you're right. A lot of cancel culture and this mob mentality is about control, and it's about the little people wanting to be able to take control and have power over the more powerful people and the institutions. But it's so, I just keep repeating, everything is so fraught, because you could make the same argument like, oh, well, what Ben Shapiro's trying to do right now is to control the narrative, to control what people believe. And of course, that's not how I view what he's doing. But you make a good point, and Zero Fucks has been talking about this too, and it's slightly tangential, but maybe the focus then really needs to be, I'm not trying to control what you listen to. I'm trying to change your mind in the old-fashioned way. You know, I'm trying to flood the zone with compelling arguments against, and maybe the headline, to Zero Fucks' point, shouldn't be this person is bad and mean and evil, even if all of those things are true. The headline needs to be based in things that people are going to respect more and could agree with on the merits. This person's anti-American. This person is counter signaling to socialists and communists. You know, this person, you know, like calling it out on those grounds, and then trying to meet that, right? Have that debate, as opposed to on the grounds of this person is harmful.
Yes.
I think that's probably going to be more compelling, especially among people
Yes,
on the right.
because people are just burnt out on people are harmful.
For good reason.
Yeah. And the other thing is like Ben Shapiro's a Jew, and there are people who don't want to hear about harm to Jews. That's not a moving or compelling argument for them. They're burnt out on it. They don't care. It's been Israel, Jew for a while, and people aren't amenable to that. There could be a time where that argument carries more again, but right now that argument is not resonating with people. It's turning it into it's turning it into like a conversation about Jews and like Jewish power and like all the fucking conspiracy shit. So it's just taking it down there instead of focusing on all of the other things that are also, that one could say are like, I want to use the word problematic, but are like distasteful, or you have disdain for, or not part of the project of the American right would want to be associated with, for with Nick Fuentes, So, but I don't think taking it down, maybe in the direction that he is, it'll resonate with people who listen to Ben Shapiro.
Right.
I don't think it'll resonate for like
much further than that,
a wider audience,
Yeah.
But I don't think he's trying. And I think the difference is like cancel culture is like, we're going to force you. You're not going to listen to us. We're going to force you. We're going to be unrelenting.
Yeah. I don't think he is.
We're going to stalk you. We're going to this. We're going to that. We're going to do all these things. And we don't care.
Think it's so easy. Yeah. Sorry, it's easy to portray what he's doing in that way, which again just gets back to, we're in this tricky time where a lot of people are earnestly trying to figure out like, what are these boundaries? What is the difference between making a statement of moral clarity and choosing who I'm going to associate with versus, like you said, trying to like ruin someone's life and enforce it in that way. But there are other people who are just, I think, cynically using these words so that people will be against the pushback. It's like what you said. Cynically misrepresenting what people like Ben are saying so that they will be villainized, that their message won't get across, right? Because like you said, I don't think what Ben's doing is cancel culture, really, by any stretch of the imagination. Ben's trying to quote unquote cancel Tucker after Ben revealed that him and like he's been asking Tucker to have not even a debate, but a conversation, right? So it's like, and he's reiterated how many times he doesn't want these people to be deplatformed or anything like that. But there are people who can cynically try to reframe it as Ben is trying to exert control for his own nefarious ends. And we're in a sticky space right now.
Yeah, I would say the people who are trying to say that that's control, who are trying to say that that's, I don't think there's any good faith way that you could say that somebody would really believe that he's trying to cancel anybody. I don't think that from everything that I've heard him say, you know what I mean? I think people don't really like what he's saying. They don't like the criticism, but nobody who's thinking clearly, nobody who's able to think clearly and to speak on these issues, thinks that he's trying to cancel him. There might be people saying that, but I think that like, again, that's just a dishonest misrepresentation of what he is saying, so that people who are not listening to him directly and who is only listening to like whoever is recounting this, their audience will hear it and believe that, and like I said, I think that's just a way of like, kind of like either I don't know if it's censoring his message, but in a way, yes, I think it is
right. It is this weird,
it's this weird way of censoring.
We'll have a word for this eventually. In a couple years, we'll have a word for this phenomenon, like you're saying.
So I think that's that, because I don't think there's any way that people could, I refuse to believe that everyone's fucking dumb,
right.
Right. There are a lot of dumb people, but like the people who are out there talking about it, these people are capable of rational thought. They're capable. I see them do it in other instances, So.
I'm just, we have to, I have to wrap up at least. I apologize.
No, sorry.
But yeah, it's a real shame. The frustration that I'm expressing is directed towards the right now, because that's where I'm disappointed. It's like the right traditionalism, conservatism,
Mhm.
in theory, is about proudly drawing moral lines, right?
Yeah.
Saying, no, actually, like, we have things that are good. There are things that are good, there are things that are bad, and our mission is to preserve the good, ruthlessly in ways.
Mhm.
So it is so sad for this to be a phenomenon of the right, where people are cowering away from just calling something bad because the left thinks it's bad. And so my criticism is directed at the right, but I do think that so much of this is because of the actions of the left. There are people like, I'm also reticent to believe an accusation about someone. And I think it's good. You should always try to investigate it for yourself
Yeah,
as much
yeah.
as you can,
Of
right?
course, yeah.
But like, I also like have a knee-jerk reaction to labels of isms and all of this stuff, right? And that is because of just how much it was cynically overused by people on the left. So, this is where we end up stuck in the middle. And yeah, I'm hoping for
Yeah.
something better on the other end of this, but
Yeah, I
it's
think we
hard to be
got
super
to.
optimistic right now.
Yeah, I think we're in the middle, and we'll see how it shakes out. I think we I don't know. I think we need some more time to kind of like look back and to see how some of these things all started, and also more
Mhm.
time to see how some of these things are like shaking out to look on the right. But I don't like. I also know that we don't necessarily have a lot of time, because some of these things are like, you know, hugely impactful. So have to also fucking
Hope we figure it out quickly. Yeah.
yeah, figure it out quickly enough, or find some, like keep iterating as we go.
Yeah. Okay, well, this is lovely. So I leave tomorrow for New York I think I'm going to be there for like 2 weeks. I'm planning to extend my trip. Maybe we'll be able to squeeze in some time to do this while I'm gone. I can't guarantee it, but I really
Okay.
appreciate these conversations that you and I have, Kay. And so I do want to kind of continue this, because again, right now there's just a million directions to going from here, although I do have to go. So maybe we will be able, I'm sure I'll be able to find, an hour or something from my parents' living room to have a
Yeah.
conversation. So we'll be in
Yeah.
touch. We'll see next time we can do this.
Yeah. And if not, we will just, take some notes, and we will,
Get back at it.
get back when you get back, and have a good time in New York.
Thank you.
And
Thank you.
yeah, yeah, a lot to figure out, what to think about.
Yeah. We sure do.
All right. Well, have a good flight. Have a good trip.
Thank you.
And we'll talk soon.
All right. Talk to all you people soon. Thank you.
Yes. Thank you. Like the stream. Go like Tally's stream too. And
Like and
or the
subscribe.
video. Yeah, like and subscribe. And
Yeah.
we will see you next time. And maybe I'll be back before then. All right.
Awesome.
Have a good night. Take care.